Hello, welcome to the Political Dispatch, the podcast that explores big issues and ideas in a conversational way.
My name is Mott.
I'm Sidd Kurapati.
And I'm Tom Spare, and we're just finishing up Masters at Cardiff University. Between work, completing our dissertations, and general life stuff, we've been meeting regularly to deliver the Political Dispatch.
Each episode, one of us will guide you through a compelling topic, examining the politics, policies, and key players involved. Join us as we take a deep dive into the major issues impacting our planet and way of life.
Elections, AI, the future of work, education. What are the debates driving the issues? What are the different perspectives and angles? We'll take you through the implications and what it might mean for you, your community, the country, and the wider world.
As it has been a while since we recorded the last show, we thought we'd help jog your memories a bit since early August.
At the start of August, the US and 6 other countries completed the biggest prisoner swap with Russia since the Cold War, involving the exchange of 24 people.
Thousands of athletes competed in the Paris Olympics and Paralympics. China finished first on both medals tables, with the US second in the Olympics and third in the Paralympics. Great Britain came 7th in the Olympics table, but recorded a historic tally of medals to come second in the Paralympics.
Between 31st July and 5th August, riots sprung up across the UK, leading to 1,280 arrests driven by far-right and anti-immigration sentiment. Nearly 800 were charged. At the same time, the UK's prison population reached its highest amount on record, leading the British government to release several hundred prisoners early.
Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned from her post and fled the country. She had been in power for over 15 years and was growing more and more unpopular. Protesters stormed key government buildings. Hasina was replaced by Nobel Peace Prize-winning economist Muhammad Yunus as the head of the government.
Drone strikes were carried out in Myanmar's western Rakhine state, killing up to 200 civilians, sparking condemnation and further accusations of genocide by the military government.
On 6th August, Kamala Harris picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate for the presidential race. The same day, Eluned Morgan became the first female First Minister of Wales.
Also, on the 6th of August, Ukraine started a surprise counteroffensive assault in Russia's Kursk region with 1,000 soldiers and tanks.
Taylor Swift's free concerts in Vienna were cancelled because of a suspected terrorist plot to target the venue.
The World Health Organization confirms the Mpox virus has spread from the Democratic Republic of Congo to Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and Kenya.
Throughout the month of August, Israel continued its attacks in Gaza, with tensions escalating on the border with Lebanon. International efforts were increased to calm the situation in the region. The death count is estimated to be in excess of 40,000 people.
Paetongtarn Shinawatra became Thailand's youngest ever prime minister, aged 37.
On the 19th of August, British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch and 5 others died when his luxury yacht capsized in a storm off the coast of Palermo.
On the 21st of August, Afghanistan's Taliban regime banned the sound of women's voices or singing in public, or traveling anywhere without a male escort.
In Botswana, the largest diamond in more than a century was found on the 22nd of August at 2,492 carats.
The following day, Vice President Kamala Harris accepted the Democratic nomination for President of the United States, becoming only the second woman to accept the nomination of either major political party.
On the 27th of August, British band Oasis announced a reunion tour 15 years after splitting up. Over 1 million people proceeded to jostle for tickets, with Ticketmaster criticized for hiking many standing tickets from £70 to over £350.
In Japan, on the 29th of August, Typhoon Shanshan made landfall, with the country issuing its highest level at level 5 alert. A couple of days earlier, as the typhoon approached Japan, winds peaked at 250 kilometers an hour, 130 mph. There were 8 fatalities and 127 injuries as a result.
On 30th of August, Elon Musk's social network X, formerly known as Twitter, was blocked after the social networking site missed a court-imposed deadline in Brazil.
On the 1st of September, the Alternative for Germany Party became the first far-right party to win a state parliament election since the 1930s.
On the same day, former Ugandan Olympic marathon runner Rebecca Cheptegei was set on fire by her former boyfriend, Endabess, and later died. She was just 33 years old.
Queenie Nawai-Hono-Itepo was named the new Maori monarch in New Zealand on 5th September. Did you know that, Tom?
I did. I wrote it down. Very good. Right. After an extended period of negotiation, President Macron of France announced a surprise appointment to Prime Minister. Michel Barnier, the EU's former chief negotiator for Brexit. Barnier, at 73, was the oldest Prime Minister appointed in French history, taking over from the youngest, Gabriel Attal.
On the 7th of September, Cyclone Yagi, Asia's most powerful storm of the year, hit China and northern Vietnam, killing 127 people, reaching wind speeds of 140 miles per hour.
On the same day, Keir Starmer became the first British Prime Minister in 5 years to visit the Republic of Ireland, meeting with his counterpart Simon Harris in Dublin.
On 10th of September, the second US presidential debate of the electoral cycle took place. The first public debate between Democratic nominee Kamala Harris and Republican nominee Donald Trump. Harris was widely considered the victor of the debate. Trump espoused a number of false claims, including immigrants eating cats in Ohio.
The crew of SpaceX Polaris Dawn completed the first commercial spacewalk during a 5-day journey through Earth's orbit. It is the furthest into space any human has been since NASA's Apollo program.
On the 15th of September, a shooter attempted to assassinate Donald Trump, the second attempt on his life in just 2 months.
On 17th and 18th September, 32 people were killed and over 3,200 injured after pagers and walkie-talkies exploded in Lebanon. Israel was accused of conducting the attack.
On the 21st of September, Anura Kumara Dissanayake was elected president of Sri Lanka following the second round of voting in the Sri Lankan presidential elections.
So that's a roundup of events from around the world. Guys, do you have any particular news stories that caught your attention? Lily, let's start with you.
I feel like I have the honor of going first, so I get to choose any of them. And now I'm a little bit nervous that maybe we have some overlap, but that's okay. I'm going to go with the presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I really want to highlight the sharing of misinformation. And I think that in this presidential debate, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump were accused of sharing misinformation and just distorting facts to bolster their positions. Most famously, Trump talked about migrants in Ohio eating dogs and cats, and that's become an internet meme that has exploded. However, Kamala Harris also made exaggerated statements about the Trump administration's handling of especially the economy. This misinformation fuels polarization, and I think especially as we lead into the election, I think it's really going to hamper the public's understanding of both candidates' platforms, because if we're just having these statements that can be based on anything, I think that it's really problematic. And it's important to highlight that yes, Trump delivered more than 30 false claims, but Kamala Harris was not entirely innocent in not exaggerating or providing misinformation either. So yeah, I kind of wanted to take that lens of it because I do think there's been so much coverage of that media circus. And I think I just really wanted to highlight it from the misinformation standpoint, because I think that's the most concerning part to me, that yes, it can be taken as a joke, but also we should really look into the statements and there should be fact-checking efforts and people should be paying attention to even the exaggerations, because that's just as important as the blatant lies. Yeah, that's my take. What do you guys think about that?
Yes, I mean, there was some interesting points where Trump was making statements and then there was live fact checking, which was really interesting. So they were sort of intercepting many of his claims. He was also, in his performance, clearly just wasn't firing on all cylinders. But I have sort of a question back to you, Lily. Did Trump say those things about cats and dogs to take up the airwaves to distract from Kamala Harris's key points that she was trying to make?
I do think that he, at this point, kind of like you said, was not firing on all cylinders, but I don't know if he'll be able to get back to that point. Like, I think it was really interesting to listen to pundits say that this is just a very different Trump than we saw in the 2016 cycle. And his whole campaign strategy of just arguing with people and spewing insults just isn't going to work against Kamala Harris in that way. And so I think the way that she managed to turn some of these statements on their head, and even starting the debate with the awkward handshake and making Kamala Harris walk around to Trump. Like, I think everything about the body language and just kind of the way that they were speaking, I do think that you're entirely right that he was just trying to distract. And I think there was a lot of moments in the debate where that was pretty clear. And also he had an opportunity to talk about his points and to talk about some of those issues that really drive home with his base. And he wasn't able to, and he made comments like the dogs and cats one instead, which really hurt his debate performance. But what about you, Sid? What do you think?
I think the debate was a very interesting sort of a spectacle, a very different one compared to the first debate that took place between Biden and Trump. You're absolutely right when you say that this was a very different kind of a Trump that we got to see in debates. He was more mellow in his approach. Some could even call it civil. I think that is quite refreshing to see. The fact that he shook hands with Kamala Harris was a very interesting moment in the debate itself. We haven't seen any sort of civility in the past between Biden and Trump. Having said that, I think Harris completely dominated the debate. She had a lot more emotion in her voice. She had a lot more emotion in her points, and especially all topics that were surrounding women's rights, gender, and abortion, which I think are going to be key issues in this election. Trump did try to go ahead and make points that would resonate with his vote bank, but I don't think he landed it with a punch. They weren't meme worthy. They weren't viral enough. On the other hand, you had Kamala Harris having a few moments which actually did become memes or GIFs for that matter. Especially that one point where she pauses after saying this, and then she just pauses there for like a couple of seconds, and it was like fill in the blank, and the internet was like, hey, we all know what she wanted to say, you know, and sort of went back to some of her interviews from the past and picked up the clip which the word which kind of fits in perfectly over there, as some would say. Having said that, I was reading a post today on Washington Post's Instagram handle. The 7 key battleground states, I think 2 of them are still tied, and Georgia is still in the favor of Trump even now. So I think the pundits are still at it, and the verdict is still out there. I don't think you can really successfully call this election right now.
Yeah, I think lots of good points there, especially about the memes and just the social media reception. I think that is going to have a really big impact, though. Just the way that, I mean, Kamala Harris has managed to entirely dominate social media compared to Trump, I think, this cycle, which has been really fascinating to see. But Sid, is there anything that caught your attention in the roundup?
Yes, absolutely. So following the general elections that took place in earlier this year in India, uh, we now have assembly elections happening in a couple of states. And out of those 2 states, one of them is now a union territory. A union territory is a geographic location where powers are divided between the state authorities as well as the central government. The central government tends to have more oversight and more power over law and order in a union territory as compared to a state. So the union territory that I'm talking about over here is Jammu and Kashmir, the contentious region that has been under scrutiny since independence in 1947. So it represents a pivotal moment in India's political landscape, especially after the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019, which stripped the region of its semi-autonomous status. These elections will be the first to be held under the Union Territory arrangement. The stakes are high, as the elections will determine the political leadership and the future direction of Jammu and Kashmir. The main contenders include the incumbent BJP, which is seeking to consolidate its control, and a coalition of regional parties, including the National Conference and People's Democratic Party, which are fighting to regain lost ground. The campaign trail has been marked by intense debates over issues such as restoration of statehood, the protection of regional identities, and economic development. The BJP has touted its decision to end Jammu and Kashmir's special status, that is the abrogation of Article 370, as a bold move to integrate the region more closely with the rest of India, while its opponents have accused the party of undermining the region's autonomy and disenfranchising the people. Now, the 2024 elections are happening after a period of 10 years, which is highly unusual. The last elections took place in 2014, after which the abrogation took place in 2019. So since 2019, the Union Territory, once it was downgraded from a state to a Union Territory, it's been run by the central government for the last 5 years. And within these 5 years, a few things have happened. There's been a delimitation where the total number of assembly seats rose to 114. And interestingly, out of which 24 seats are designated for areas that fall under Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is a significant chunk of the original Kingdom of Kashmir, which was occupied by Pakistan back in 1947-48. And out of the remaining 90 seats, 43 are in the Jammu division, while 47 are in the Kashmir division. Now, having said that, reports say that there is a lot more of energy on the ground for this assembly elections, and it's been divided into 3 phases. India loves to conduct, elections in different phases. So the Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory elections are happening over 3 phases. Also, there's a lot of concern for security due to terrorist activities and separatist movements in that region. So having said that, there's been a lot more energy in this assembly elections with over 61% voting in the first phase. Interestingly, you have pundits that are saying that more independent candidates may win seats this time, and that the BJP is propping up more independent candidates to break the vote for the National Conference and the Indian National Congress. They say that a split verdict will benefit the BJP, which is right now struggling to find a foothold in the valley. And valley is like the reference to Kashmir, while Jammu is, further south of the region, so that they can have their own chief minister, especially because this is India's only Muslim majority state. One of the things that we need to know about Jammu and Kashmir as a state or as a union territory is that being in a very contentious region that has seen a lot of wars, has seen separatist movements, and has seen militancy and terrorism over the last 3 decades, relations between Jammu and Kashmir and Delhi have always been a bit tense. And since the 90s, whichever government that's come into power in Jammu and Kashmir has always come into power with the approval, so-called approval of New Delhi. And that tenseness, if I can call it that, has kind of sustained over the 3 decades, and it's still there. But since the last elections took place in over 10 years ago, you have a new generation of new voters who have come up and who are looking at newer issues, which are more around development, employment, and regional identity, rather than national security as one of the main points, which has been for the last 30 years. And that is what makes this election extremely interesting. The thing is that this multi-stage election will allow Jammu and Kashmir to have its own truncated government and local legislature instead of remaining directly under New Delhi's rule. However, there is only going to be like a limited transition of power from New Delhi to Jammu and Kashmir, especially with law and order being directly in control of the central government. First phase has been completed. We are awaiting second phase and third phase, and then the counting is going to happen in first week of October. Right. So that's the news from my end. Do you guys have any questions?
I've got a question, Sid.
Go ahead, Tom.
Why is it a contentious region? And if you could sort of, I know this is very difficult to do, but could you sort of give a brief history and also like geographically where are we talking about? Because some of the listeners might not necessarily know?
Sure. So, so geographically, the former state of Jammu and Kashmir is the northernmost state of India. In many ways, it's considered to be the crown jewel of India, and it's bordered by Pakistan on its west, China on the east. It's been under contention and geopolitical border issues since India became independent in 1947. Now, the history is that when India was becoming independent, the region had over 500 princely states, each of which had to choose between India or Pakistan as to which country they were joining. Now, both, the Indian administration at that point in time, led by Pandit Nehru, and the Pakistan administration led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, both wanted Kashmir. And they both presented their points of view on why they should join their respective countries. And Kashmir was and is still a Muslim majority state, which is one of the reasons why Jinnah really wanted it to be part of Pakistan. And Pandit Nehru wanted it to be India because he was from India. And of course, other major, political reasons for it. Before the Maharaja of Kashmir could make his decision, Pakistan had allegedly sent in, rebel units to create a rebellion among the people and create unrest so that they join Pakistan. But India went in and defended the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir at that point in time. And in that moment, the Maharaja of Kashmir chose to side with India, and he signed the papers, official documents that said that India can officially annex Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan has contested this long since, and we had our first war with Pakistan in 1948 because of that. After which, since the war was kind of raging on, Nehru decided that it would be best if an international resolution happens, and he pitched out to the United Nations to intervene. They established a ceasefire. That ceasefire basically created the line of control, which is now the border between Pakistan and India, which runs through the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So the Pakistan side of it is called POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir, how it is called in India. And the Indian side of it is called Indian Administered Kashmir by Pakistan. We call it Jammu and Kashmir. And since then, we've had the War of 65, War of 71, and 1998 Kargil War as well. So we've had 3 wars after the first one, all of which where the major flashpoints have been in Kashmir itself. So it's been in a very contentious region. And in the 80s, the region also witnessed very high militancy and terrorist activities, which led to the exodus of a particular ethnic group, which was belonging to Kashmir, and which was a Hindu ethnic group. They were driven out of the valley to Jammu, and that created further communal tensions, which of course have been consistently been fanned by the BJP over the years for political gains. When Jammu and Kashmir joined India, it was given a special status, which allowed it to have its own constitution and its own assembly and certain, domicile status, so that like rest of India could not go ahead and buy land and whatnot and everything. And that status was given through Article 370 of the India's constitution. That article was abrogated in 2019 very abruptly by the Modi government after they came into power for the second time. Once they abrogated it, they put the state under communications and internet blackout for almost a few months to quell any sort of protest or any sort of reports coming in and out of the state, and increasingly militarize the area. I'm not judging their decision if it was right or wrong to abrogate the article. Certainly, the way they did it is probably they could have done it in a better way. I would probably say that for sure.
What comes to me when you're talking about this, Sidd, is how many places around the world have different variations of the problem that you're explaining, right? You can think of like Northern Ireland. You can think about the disagreements between Turkey and Greece and Cyprus. You can think about lots of aspects, even like North and South Korea. And obviously, before the Cold War finished, you had East and West Germany, which when we were doing a summary of news events, East Germany voting in the way, or in the East German state voting in the way it did towards sort of the far right, it just sort of says a lot, doesn't it, around partitions and these historic events that go on and how they shape these particular places, often places that aren't massive. They're not huge in relation to the rest of the size of the country. And obviously what's going on in Israel and Palestine is another example of partition and things happening over time, settling, internal conflict and so on. It was just a thought more than anything, but yeah, I don't know if you
Yeah, no,
agree.
absolutely. Completely agree with you. At the end of the day, it's the population that's native to the region which suffers the most in almost all these cases. So that's the population that suffers the most when you have two contentious powers, and in this case, you have two nuclear powers trying to fight over the region. You don't have any other region in the world which has three nuclear countries that don't get along with each other, and they're right there, neighboring each other. I would say the population of Jammu and Kashmir has suffered a lot over the last 3 decades. Hopefully, this election brings about some change and some development to the region. What about you, Tom? What's your story?
Well, I was born in a... No, I'm going to be serious. Yeah, my story is about... Well, actually, I'm going to cheat and have two quick ones, if that's okay. The first one is the appointment of Wales's first woman First Minister, which is historic, which followed Wales's election of the first person of colour in leadership in Europe, in Vaughan Gething, who was only First Minister for 118 days. He had to leave, well, he resigned because of controversies relating to donations that he'd received as part of his election campaign, related to the person who donated had offences relating to the environment. Eluned Morgan, her appointment is, big news. And it comes at a time of precariousness for Wales, and for Labour in Wales in particular. Basically, Labour has dominated Wales for over a century, but come the election in a couple of years, the Senedd election in 2026, there's going to be a change in the way in which the Senedd is elected, and the membership of the Senedd is expanding from 60 to 96 members. So it could well be that Labour's dominance in Wales starts to falter. The Reform Party might do very well, Plaid Cymru might do very well, and even the Liberal Democrats, who have been quite a dormant force in Welsh politics. Her appointment as First Minister has come at quite a precarious time for Labour, at a time when in Westminster you have a large Labour majority. So it's quite sort of odd that for decades, Labour's been so dominant in Wales. But then as soon as you get a Labour government in London, things are a little bit rockier. So it'd be interesting to see where we go. The First Minister brought back Mark Drakeford, who was the former First Minister. So he was temporarily the Health Minister again after having that brief many years ago, and then also is now the Finance Minister, which is quite a sort of telling sign, really. So it's sort of a change, a new change, but then also sort of same old news and just people being sort of moved around, really. The other story was around the controversy, in inverted commas, around Sue Gray's pay. And she is Keir Starmer's chief of staff in Downing Street. And there was a leak suggesting that she gets paid more than the Prime Minister. My thoughts on it all were, I don't really care how much you're getting paid as long as you're doing a good job. And if you're not doing a good job, then you should leave. And I think it would have been a different story if Sue Gray had been a man. And I think there'd be lots of pattings on the back saying, oh, you've done a jolly good job here. You deserve everything. You know, we need the talent, etc. So, yeah, I think it says a lot about the dysfunctionality within the Labour government so early on. And it makes me question as well, do Labour have a problem with how they manage their political communications? And there's also been lots of accusations around who's paying for people's clothes and donors. So it seems that there's a problem with Welsh Labour and donors, and there seems to be a problem with sort of UK-wide Labour and donors as well. And I sort of think if you can't pay for your own glasses and the clothes that you wear, a lot of these people are on pretty decent pay, you know, they're not on benefits or anything like that, you know, and they can afford to have these things. How are you meant to be trusting them in making decisions that are going to affect us all for years to come? Seems like I'm a bit anti-Labour, but I'm just a little bit fed up with, yeah, a lot of the narratives that's been generated there.
There are larger issues at hand. There are bigger issues that need to be tackled. When you compare them to the kind of leaks that are happening right now, it does make you think that the population wants somebody who is spick and span and very ideal and, you know, in a role model sort of a nature to be the head of government. But it seems, when you look at it very logically, I guess, it seems very trivial at the end of the day, doesn't it? I mean, that's the perspective I'm coming from, that, you know, yeah, you can afford to buy your own clothes, but you did get clothes, you know, from somewhere else. The the more important thing is that, you know, what are you doing wearing those clothes? You're doing your job. Are you doing a decent job? Are you doing a good job? Are you doing a bad job? If you're doing a bad job, okay, fair enough, criticize. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. So in the UK, I think we criticize our leaders very quickly. You know, the honeymoon period for a lot of British politicians these days is very short. You only have to look at the situation with Vaughan Gething, or, you know, the First Minister in Scotland who had to, well, a couple of First Ministers that we've had. We've had quite a churn. There's been controversy in Northern Ireland about, you know, various leaders and controversial pasts there in more ways than one, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose people's sympathy for politicians in the UK is quite limited, and perhaps we gave people a wider berth, you know, before. And I don't know whether that's a symptom of the system that we live in. I think also, yeah, if you put it into perspective, like, for example, Gary Neville, the footballer who now seems to be a political commentator as well, very prominent in the Labour Party. He defended Keir Starmer by saying that, well, the Tories spent billions of pounds, you know, of taxpayers' money. They gave dodgy contracts to their friends, all of that sort of thing. I just think that, you know, they've got this huge majority. They're telling us that it's all doom and gloom and difficult decisions are going to have to be made. But you get hung up on people's pay, what people are wearing. And I just don't know. For me, it's less about who's paying for what and more about just get your ducks in a row. You've been planning this for a long time and you don't seem to be getting the basics right. And that's my frustration.
Lily, doesn't it kind of remind you of the situation where Obama once wore a tan suit and he came out for a press conference and then the whole media went crazy about it?
I feel like this situation, obviously being someone who didn't get to participate in the general election, but is living in the consequences of it. I think for me, it's kind of what Tom, I think the tan suit fiasco, goodness gracious, that was something else entirely. But I
10th,
think
10th anniversary this year.
really, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, bringing it back, the perfect time. But I think it's kind of the idea of just the principle of the thing, right? It's like if you're nickel and diming and trying to figure out ways to scam the system in this way that is very small, what else are you willing to do? I guess I'm kind of like flipping it on its head a little bit, where it's like, yes, it is very small, but that doesn't bode well for the bigger decisions. I just think, especially being new in government, and like we saw this surge of excitement, Tom, like you said, now it's been all doom and gloom, and honestly, kind of a foreboding that it's not going to last long. That's kind of my take. Very negative. Sorry, everyone, but yes.
So that concludes this episode of the Political Dispatch.
We would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the podcast. We would also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. So please leave us a rating or a comment wherever you're listening to this podcast now.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.